Whether the team is giving us the highest of highs or the bluest of blue, we cover it all here on Commanders Nightly News. I, of course, am your host, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Let's get to tonight's lead story. So tonight we've got co-lead stories. The big news of the day, of course, Sam Howell getting the start, but how we got there was a bit ominous, to say the least. I think it's a bit deceptive. We'll talk about that in a second. And the other co-lead is putting a bow on the Browns game. There were some things that I left out yesterday that I did that intentionally so that we could come back and have something to talk about today. I wasn't really expecting the Sam Howell news to generate the type of conversation that it did, because I thought they were going to do the right thing from the jump. But I wanted to save something from yesterday, bring it up today, and so we'll do that as well. But let's start with Sam Howell. So initially this morning, reports were, and I forget the exact source. It was one of these ESPN dudes, Jeremy something. I don't quite remember his name, but he had the initial report that Washington was going to start Heineke, but that Sam Howell would get some run. He would get some series, some reps in the game. And it was the stupidest thing I had ever heard. I was like, you got to be kidding me, right? Like, you guys have already botched this thing, 6 ways to Sunday. Please tell me you're not going to F up the last bit of decency that you can have this season is to start Sam Howell. It's the last rational thing you can do in what has been an irrational finish to the season. It's the last thing you can do to appease the little bit of fans that are still paying attention, okay? So my simple tweet was, you dummies. Essentially, you dummies. Because clearly you don't get it. Like, you're out of it, dude. I don't want to hear about we're playing to win, yada, yada. Who cares? You're out of it. At this point, now we're on to evaluating players for next year, and there is no position that needs to be evaluated more than the quarterback position. And Sam Howell was a 5th-round pick. You claimed to have a 2nd-round grade on him. And so if you really feel good about Sam Howell, if you really feel good about the progress that he has made throughout the course of this year, then you give him this final start. What are you doing? So I was prepared to come on here and absolutely crucify this group. Look, they already should be gone, right? They already need to be fired, but they're not going to be, okay? This would have been like the last straw if Rivera, and he tried to make it seem, he being Ronald Rivera, tried to make it seem as if he had a sensible conversation with staff members and people that he trusts. And this is how he came to the conclusion of starting Sam Howell in this final game. And I'm going to pull his card and I'm going to call his bluff, because if you had made this decision with staff members and people that you trust, that you want to keep anonymous, then this decision would have been made prior to the media getting a hold of your decision initially to start Taylor Heineke, okay? That's the decision that you came to when you talked to your staff members, and maybe you hadn't talked to some of your confidants yet, but you talked to the staff and you guys came to an initial agreement on starting Taylor Heineke. You put that out into the media to see how it would be responded to. You got crucified and killed for it, and quickly you backtracked and you decided to do the right thing. That's what I think happened. If you really, truly wanted to go with Sam Howell all along, that would have been put out initially. This would have never been a Heineke's going to start initially type of thing, all right? There would have been no miscommunication, because you would have already made the smart, sound decision that, hey, we're out of it. We got nothing left to play for other than pride. Let's see what the young fellas can do. We're going to get as many of these young guys out there, including Sam Howell. This, for all intents and purposes for Washington, will be a preseason game. For Dallas, they're playing for an opportunity to win the NFC East and potentially be the, 1 or 2 seed in the conference. We're playing this as if it's a preseason game. Hey, as many young fellas as can get out there, let's get them out there. And wait till you see the injury report. That'll tell you all you need to know. But I just think it's another one of these situations where Ron Rivera just doesn't get it. Ronald doesn't get it. I don't think he got this initially. I don't think he understood. And this goes back to not knowing that we could be eliminated, because I truly believe had he knew we could be eliminated, he would have went to Heineke after the slow start by Wentz, which is what I was calling for. I said this. I've been on record as saying this. I didn't have a problem with them going to Wentz. I didn't necessarily love it nor agree with it, but I didn't have a problem with it. They were looking for a spark. Once you saw that spark was not going to be delivered after he threw 2 interceptions. This was not the Jacksonville game where he came out smoking hot and then had the 2 interceptions and you wanted to give him a chance to redeem himself. He came out of the gate stinking it up, overthrowing guys, dirting balls to guys in the flats, throwing it to the wrong color jersey. You had enough tangible evidence that this guy wasn't going to get you where you wanted to go, and you should have pulled him after the second interception when it was a 3-0 game, and you would have still had a chance to kick the Browns' ass. I think if he would have known that they could have been eliminated, which is, again, pure negligence on his part of not knowing this, but I think if he would have known that there was a chance that, hey, we could be eliminated here, he would have gone back to Heineke during that game instead of talking about, well, we were down 14 and so I knew we were going to have to throw the football down the field. That's the biggest crock of shit, this whole narrative of Heineke can't throw the ball down the field. Wentz isn't throwing the shit down the field either. He's not, at least not to the right color jersey, so what difference does it make? You can get chunk plays with Taylor Heineke. Like, that's the stupidest thing ever. Well, once we were down 14, we had to start throwing it down the field. Okay, man, whatever. Okay, man. He was going to start Heineke in this game. That was the initial agreement and conclusion that they had come to. And then they put it out there, and just like he got his ass drugged for not knowing, just like he got his ass drugged for not having his team prepared, he saw the backlash coming, said, hey, we don't need this shit, and they put in Sam Howell, which is what they should have done from the jump. This is why we need a new coaching staff. And as much as I like Ron, and some of you have said, if he gets rid of Scott Turner, I can stomach more Ronald. I can stomach more Ronald too without Scott Turner. My problem is, and I already know this, he's not getting rid of Scott Turner. He hasn't once, and I'm not looking for anyone to be thrown under the bus. That's not what I'm requiring. That's not what I'm looking for. Because if you are good at your job, you avoid doing those things. There's no place for that. There's no reason for that. There are extreme circumstances. This is not it. Scott Turner isn't throwing anybody else under the bus, so you don't in turn need to go tit for tat. I just want accountability. I haven't gotten any from Ron. Other than, we didn't get it done and that's my fault, which is fine. You can fall on the sword. But it would be nice to acknowledge that the offense wasn't good enough. The play calling wasn't good enough. The red zone efficiency or lack thereof wasn't good enough. Scoring less than 18 points a game isn't good enough. I would like for you to acknowledge that, you know what? It's not just quarterback. That's what he keeps trying to blame it on. And you listen to him today, everything, he had an excuse for everything. And yesterday he said he didn't want to say anything because people would view it as excuses. Well, we know what you're going to say. Oh, we had injuries. Every team in the league has injuries. Nobody has more injuries than the Tennessee Titans. They're playing for their division. Nobody has more injuries than the Los Angeles Chargers. They're in the playoffs. No one wants to hear about your damn injuries. The Cowboys have a ton of injuries. They were without their left tackle for the entire season, pretty much. They had no receivers for the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season other than CeeDee Lamb. They had no Dak Prescott for 5 whole weeks. Nobody wants to hear your injuries excuse. Injuries are a part of the game. I just want accountability for these coaches. I don't think we're going to get it. And thus, he has to go because he's going to bring this same tired-ass sorry staff back. And really, the individual positional coaches, I don't think are terrible on this staff. I'm just looking at Scott Turner and saying, if you get rid of Scott Turner and you get me a competent offensive coordinator in here, you know what? I may be okay with Ronald coming back. But I know deep down inside, Ronald isn't going to do that. He's loyal to a fault, which is why Ronald has to pack his things and go. But because of our situation, he'll be back for another year, and we'll have to win 7 games yet again, which this is the problem with winning 7 games. And I'd be the first to tell you, I don't want to suck. The pain and the anguish that you have to go through, like 19 was one of the worst seasons as a fan in recent memory. I don't want to go through that again. Unless you can, and you can't insure me anything. Unless you can insure me, bro, you're getting a franchise quarterback for the next 15 years. You got nothing to worry about at that position. Yeah, okay, sign me up for the pain and anguish one more time. But if I have to go through that and then at the end of the tunnel, it's Chase Young and not Joe Burrow, I don't want to go through that shit again. I don't. So here we are at 7 wins again, not garbage enough to get to the quarterback that you want, not good enough to make the playoffs, so you're just kind of just dangling in no man's land, right? Frustrating stuff, frustrating stuff. Could we trade up for a quarterback? Of course, and this is the year. If you're going to do it, this is the year to do it, because there's a very, very distinct possibility that the Chicago Bears will be the number 2 pick in the draft, and they have their quarterback, so they should be open for business. Because whomever doesn't go 1 will go 2. And whether it's Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, one of those 2 gentlemen will be going 1, and the other will be going 2, and the Bears don't need a quarterback. Thus, someone is going to come calling. I surmise it'll be the Indianapolis Colts, and we won't even get a chance to even sniff at getting one of those 2. And if you're not getting one of those 2, after that, it's a crapshoot, honestly. I don't think I love any other quarterback in the draft other than those 2 gentlemen. So we'll see what happens. But the other co-lead story was, I just wanted to put a bow on the Browns game. There was a comment from Reggie Ragland, linebacker of the Browns, played in the game against Washington on Sunday. This was brought up to Ron at the press conference on Monday. And, Ron pretty much didn't really know how to respond to this and said, look, I talked to guys. One of the things Ron had mentioned, numerous times was I talked to some of the leaders on the team. I talked to some of the players on the team about making the quarterback switch. I told you guys last week, the very first episode of the week, I believe it was 17.1, and I think the title was something along the lines of, this is a massive decision, and it could have far-reaching consequences. I don't remember the name of the show, but I literally said, not everyone in this locker room and every decision that is made by a quarterback isn't going to be supported 100% by all members of the locker room. So understand that, and I get that. However, I think there were more guys in that locker room that preferred Heineke over Carson Wentz. They're going to roll with the guy that you give the football to. That's how these players are wired. If you're going to give it to 11, all right, 11's up. We're going to roll with him because he's the guy in the game. But to a man, I guarantee you, if you go around, you poll that locker room anonymously, and you ask them, who would you rather have starting 4 or 11 going into that Browns game, I guarantee you it would have been a resounding give me 4. If I were playing that locker room, I would have wanted 4. Because I've said this numerous times. For all the mistakes, turnovers, this, that, size, all of that good stuff, when the game's on the line and you give him the football and you say, hey, guy, we need it, He hasn't let us down yet. Even the Giants game. He took us right down the field, and the officials decided that they weren't going to throw the flag. Now, he tried to throw a pick. That's not his fault that the defender couldn't catch. He had an opportunity. He threw it to Curtis Samuel, and he had a guy on his back like a backpack. He took us down the field, though. Wasn't his fault that we couldn't run the football in or we didn't try to run the football in. Same could be said in the 49ers game. He took us down the field. Wasn't his fault that we ran it 4 straight times and we couldn't get in. Wasn't his fault that he threw a pass that, Jahan Dotson claims, sun got in his eyes, whatever. Would have been a touchdown. Not his fault. Heineke, and it's hindsight now, but Heineke should have started that game. But Reggie Ragland said that players on the team told him that they preferred Taylor Heineke. And this was brought up to Ron, and Ron sounded, surprised and shocked, like, hey, if anybody had any issues, I want them to come to me type of deal. But I believe Reggie Ragland. He played at Alabama with a number of players. We have a ton of Alabama players on our football team. Guys that he would have crossed paths with either at school at the same time as him, or just because you're alumni, you went there. You're going to see these guys when you all come back to the campus, a big game, you're all on the sidelines. You know of each other, okay? Whether it's Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, Cam Sims, there's a number of Alabama players on our football team. So I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that someone said something to him about preferring Heineke. But that just goes to show you that there's probably a little bit of, hey, does this dude know what the hell he's doing in the locker room? Just a little bit. And I don't think these guys are turning on Ron by any stretch of the imagination. But I do think there is a bit of questioning. I told you Brian Robinson already was not really on board with the play calling by Scott Turner. Like, there are already people looking at certain members of this staff and saying, I wonder if he knows what the hell he's doing. Think you can add Ron to that list now after the decision to go to Wentz and having it blow up in his face and go as horribly as it did, and him do nothing, stand there on the sideline. And this is the thing that makes it worse and exacerbates the problem, is he stood there and did nothing. He watched Carson Wentz suffer, and watched us as fans suffer and did nothing. Not once did he step in and say, enough. The job of a trainer in boxing, above all else, is to protect his fighter. You see your guy getting his brains bashed in, it is your job, even if it's against the wishes of the fighter, it is your job to tell him you've had enough. We'll live to fight another day. He watched Carson Wentz getting his ass beat to a pulp and did nothing. Just stood with his arms folded and watched this man get his ass destroyed, along with our hopes of going to the playoffs. I got one more thing to say. There were 2 people that said this, and it was funny to me at the time. Now I'm looking at it, and I'm like dead ass serious right now. Frankie Yo mentioned the name Tyler Larson after the Giants game, the first one, when he got injured. And there was someone else, and I went looking for the comment feverishly, and I could not find it. But someone said, you know who the MVP of this team is? It's Tyler Larson. Because pretty much since he's come back, we've won every game that he's played in. And when he doesn't play, shit goes to hell in the handbasket. And I laughed at that comment when it was first made. And this had to be every bit of a month and a half ago. He got injured in the first Giants game prior to the bye. So you're talking about roughly a month ago. And I laughed and I was like, man, that's funny. I'm not laughing now. That shit seems as real as a diamond that is actually cubic zirconia. That shit looks real right now. I'm thinking about the center position, just like I'm thinking about Cam Curl on the defensive side of football and how we struggle without him in the lineup. And I'm thinking about our worst performances came when we didn't have stability at center. Think about it. Week 1 against Jacksonville, offensive line was pretty good. Probably was their best performance of the season, if you want to be honest. Week 2, very last play of the game, we lose Chase Roulier for the season, right? Terrible first half, but we rebounded in the second half of that game, and we moved it up and down the field against the Lions, okay? You go to week 3. There's no Tyler Larson. He's still on IR. There's no Chase Roulier. He's just been placed on IR. His season is done. And we moved to Wes Schweitzer, and it's the worst game of the season for the offensive line. You go to the following week. They say, man, that was a disaster. Wes Schweitzer got injured. They had to put Nick Martin in. He wasn't much better against Dallas the following week. We were awful. Wentz was under siege. We did run the football. We did run the football in week 4 against Dallas. We had 3 guys over 50 yards rushing in that game. So we ran it pretty well, but we couldn't protect to save our damn lives. Okay? Again, you get to week 5 against Tennessee. And I think this is when Larson comes off of the injury report. I think this is his first game. And the offensive line was actually really good. Wentz had time in that game. You remember that was the De'Ami Brown 2 touchdowns, 105 yards on 2 catches game. And Wentz had time in that game. And then the streak starts. And he might have been back the Chicago game. That might have been his first game back. It might not have been week 5. Might have been week 6. Whatever the case may be, you saw the uptick in performance. And remember what I told you when he had a back issue, not the Giants game, but the game before that against the Texans, and they didn't know if he was going to play. I said, hey, listen to me, guys. Tyler Larson is a big effing deal. Like, I told you, I said, I don't really want to find out what this team is going to look like without him. I said, there are a lot of guys that we can forge on and forge forward without, like Cole Holcomb, for instance. Love him, would prefer to have him on the field than not have him, but we can make do without it. All right. There are certain guys on this team where you go, hey, if he's not playing, Cam Curl, clearly one of those guys. If he's not playing, we have a problem. The center position for us was definitely a problem because a lot of our pressure, a lot of our breakdowns and protection came right up the middle where the quarterback has absolutely no chance. And Frankie Yo literally said, no one's really talking about Tyler Larson, but I'm telling you, I'm really worried about this. He couldn't have been more right. And then somebody else said, our record with Tyler Larson, and they put his record on. I can't find that comment to save my life. I just remember laughing at it. But I think the record with Tyler Larson at center was something, starting games. I think he started the Bears game. I'm not sure he was back for the Titans game. He may have been. I want to say he came back against the Bears, and his last start was the first Giants game. So what did we go in that stretch? 6-2? 6-1-1, excuse me. What did we go in that stretch? 6-1-1? The lone loss being the Vikings game and then the tie. And then he gets hurt at MetLife Stadium and doesn't play the rest of the season. And we don't win another game. I don't know if that's a coincidence or not. I'm not saying. I'm just saying. Anyway, let's get to in other news. Real quick, got tickets to give away for the final time of the season. Mob, you've been outstanding all year long. Patreon supporters, I can't thank you enough. So we're going to do this thing one final time this season. If you are interested in the tickets, and I don't really know why you would be, but if you're dying to see Sam Howell's first start, if you want to be there on Sunday in a sea of Cowboys fans, then use the hashtag SamTime. That's SamTime. 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 And I will put that in the comment section, pin it to the top so you know exactly what hashtag to use. But the hashtag is SamTime. If you are a member of Patreon or the MOBB and you want to be in the building for the Week 18 finale versus the Dallas Cowboys, use the hashtag SamTime. So, speaking of Sam, he's going to get the nod. He spoke today to reporters. Ron Rivera spoke. Really, we'll get into what was said today. Let's go quickly through the injury report. Not really that we give a damn, but, anyway. Everybody you see on this list is not playing. We can make this very clear. We don't have to spend a lot of time. You see all of these DMPs, these guys aren't playing, and they have no reason to play, okay? Season's done. A lot of these guys have been dealing with injuries, gutting it out. Now that we're out of it, there's no reason for them to push it in Week 18, and so half of the squad will not be in attendance in Week 18 when we take on the Dallas Cowboys. Meanwhile, on the Dallas side of things, they're looking rather healthy for a team fighting for the number 1 seed, number 2 seed in the NFC East. Only 5 guys on the injury report, and probably all except Tyler Biadasz, who is definitely out of this game. All these guys are going to play. So there is that. So Ronald Rivera stepped to the microphone today. Obviously, he cleaned up the misinformation that he tried to make it seem as it was spread that Taylor Heinicke would get the start. Clearly, that's the decision that they had made initially. I think they put it out there intentionally, gave that information to ESPN to see how it would be received. Once they got that backlash and realized they were making a mistake, they then quickly pivoted and went to Sam Howell, which is what they should have done from the jump. It never made any sense that he wasn't starting to begin with. That was the stupidest thing they could have done had they not started him. But nonetheless, he talked about Howell and him getting this opportunity. He talked about talking to all the quarterbacks to let them know about this situation and how he felt about everything. And he said it was the right thing to do. You're getting to the point of the season where, you want to evaluate players. This is why you should have named him the starter from the jump. Like, there was nothing to talk about. After the game, once you realized, which you didn't know initially, that we were eliminated, that Monday you should have come back and said, yeah, we're going to go ahead and make the move to start Sam on Sunday against Dallas. Like, what do you need to discuss with the rest of the staff at this point? You don't need to go back to Taylor. It's too damn late for that, right? Like, season's done. What are you going back to Taylor for? We know what Taylor is. We know what Carson Wentz is. I already said after he lost that game in pathetic fashion, his career in Washington is done. We don't need to see him in a uniform again. No less playing. He doesn't even need to be in uniform, not active on the sidelines in civvies. And then after the season is done, he can go, which he's going to be inactive on Sunday, as he should be. Okay. And they asked Ronald at least 3 Carson. They were trying to get, Ronald to say something, derogatory about Carson, and that's not Ronald's thing, and nor should it be. It is what it is. But at the end of the day, Sam's getting the start, and Ronald talked about the roster again and all of the guys that he. So this was the thing that really pissed. This was the biggest. If you don't remember anything else that Ronald said today, this is the thing that should get under your skin, right? And should have it crawling, and it should make you want to scream. So he was asked a question by, I want to say, Scott Abraham of Channel 7. And the question pretty much was, you said that year 3 was going to be a big year for you. You were looking for growth and you were looking for development in this team. You were looking to really take that next step. Do you think that this was a successful season? And I cannot believe what I heard Ronald Rivera say, which is why he can't be our coach. Because this man looked us in the eyes and said, yes, I do think this was a successful season. So you think winning the same amount of games that we won the first year that you got here in 2020 with an awful roster that included Isaiah Wright and Dontrell Inman and guys like that on the football team, all right? You think that it's okay and acceptable to win the same amount of games that team in 2020 had as this year? You think it's acceptable to win the same amount of games as you won last year? Correct me if I'm wrong, but improvement means doing better. Okay, right? Like the way we judge improvement in this league is by one metric: winning. Now, individual players, sure. The eyeball test tells us that Jamin Davis is no longer in the bust category for some of you. He was never in the bust category for me, not after one season, but for some of you, you were ready to ship this man off. And so he's no longer in that category. He's proven to you guys that he can play. That's by the eyeball test, right? The eye test tells you, hey, he's a keeper, right? You look around the rest of the roster, maybe you weren't sure about Benjamin St-Juste. Dealt with some injuries as a rookie, looked really good when he played, but didn't play enough for you. Played this year, you say, hey, we got a keeper at corner in Benjamin St-Juste. You look at safety Derek Forrest. You say, hey, didn't really see him last year on the field defensively. Thought he was going to be a special teams guy, more in the mold of a DeShazer Everett. Now we've seen that this guy can play some ball. We got ourselves a keeper. So the eye test tells you that there has been some growth and development with individual players. But if we're talking about the season as a whole, if we're talking about this team, the entire roster taking a step forward, how can the answer be yes when we missed the playoffs again and we're going to finish with the exact same win total from the first two seasons that you were here? The only stat that matters is wins, and you didn't do that. He had the audacity to talk about not having the running backs for the beginning of the season and missing certain guys for the entire year and all of this bullshit that he's spewing. And I'm thinking to myself, dude, you weren't complaining about any of this shit when we won 4 games out of 5. You weren't complaining about that shit when we won 5 games out of 6. I didn't hear you once complain about Cole Holcomb being lost for the season. I didn't hear you once complain about Brian Robinson missing the first 4 games of the season, or J.D. McKissick being out after week 7 or whatever it was. I didn't hear you once complain about any of that shit when it was going good. Now that we've seen the bottom fall out of the season, now you got all these excuses as to why we didn't take that next step, but you still feel like the season was a success. Man, if that ain't some loser damn talk, I don't know what is. This is why he has to go. I can't take this shit, man. Y'all know how competitive I am. And to hear this man really sit there and say, yeah, I do think we had a successful season. So your definition of success is finishing in dead last in the division again, okay? Again, we didn't finish in last year. The Giants did, but shit. What difference does it make? 3rd, 4th? You still won 7 games and didn't make the damn playoffs. This year, you're in dead ass last. So you actually finished worse than you did last year because you weren't even in last place in the division last year. You're in dead ass last. You missed the playoffs. You're going to finish the season losing 4 in a row. You're going to finish the season not winning 5 in a row. And you're going to tell me that this was a successful season? Please, somebody, get this man a pink slip and get his ass out of here. Unreal. After he said that, I didn't want to hear anything else out of his mouth for the rest of the day. I was done with him. You go to Sam Howell, and the kid's just happy to play. You know, he talked about learning from Carson, and I'm like, that's not a good thing. Don't let anybody else hear you say that shit. But seriously, how to be a pro. Carson can help him with that. Carson can help him with preparation for the week and getting ready for a game and all that stuff. And he said this room has been excellent for him with Taylor and all that stuff, and that's great. But the true test will be when he gets on the field. And Ronald said that, look, I'm not going to lie to you, it's going to be a lot of funny lookings out on the field with him. All right, so how you evaluate them, that's on you. But they asked him about the receivers. Are they going to be out there? He's like, yeah, if we're in the game. Yeah, so because we're going to get our asses whooped in this game. I mean, we're going to get a mud hole stomped in us. So if the shit is 21-3 midway through the second, all right, Terry, you're done for the season. Jahan, you can go ahead and get out. And Curtis, you done too. So now it's really a preseason game. All right, it's really turning into a full-on preseason game. And this is the game that you guys want to choose to evaluate poor Sam Howell. If nothing else, I said this. This will be a great test for the young quarterback. On the road, raucous environment, lively crowd, you know, having to go silent count. This is going to be a good test for him. I'm actually interested to see how he handles the environment of being on the road, having to go silent count, having to be able to identify what Dallas is doing up front and get the communication going, you know, on the road. Going to be interesting, but if he can handle this, handle it well, look like he belongs, maybe, just maybe, we may have something moving into next year, especially if he's going to have to do it with 2/3 of the roster not being on the field with him. If he can keep this thing competitive for 3 quarters, look, if we get our ass whooped in the 4th quarter, so be it. But if he can keep this thing competitive and actually score more than our season average, which is roughly 18 points, if he can somehow manage to do that against a Dallas defense that will be out for blood in this game, if he scores 20 points, I'm going to tip my cap to Sam and I say, you know what? I'm storing it in the memory bank for next year. I can't guarantee you anything, but I'm storing it away in the memory bank. We'll see what happens. But anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T here on this installment of Commanders Nightly News. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys tomorrow night live, where we should have plenty to talk about with this football team. I mean, my God, I was just taken aback by some of the things that were said today, you know, but nonetheless, this is where we are. This is the situation. We can talk about Derek Carr. We can talk about Sam Howell's first start. We can talk about Ronald Rivera and his staff. We can talk about the quarterback position. We can talk about whatever the hell. We can talk about whatever you like. Yeah, we should have a lot to discuss tomorrow night. So I ask you to pull up 9:30p, LouieTeeNetwork. You know what it is. Until then, you guys have a good one. Take care. God bless. And good night.
Here comes the diesel. Here comes the diesel. There's the snap. Hand to Riggins. Good hold. He's got the first down to the 40. He's gone. The 35.